Hi everyone, I wanted to spend a few minutes answering this question before we get any deeper into the class. So we've learned all that terminology, starting to wrap our heads around that. Let's take a look just where we're going to go, because once we get the terminology under our belt, well then obviously then we dive in. So let's answer the question, what is Math 119, or more specifically, what is statistics? Well, simply put, see if my mouse will work. Oh, okay. Simply put, a statistic, if we define the word statistic, a statistic is a number that illuminates a characteristic from a sample. So we saw that definition, if you're thinking about like statistic versus parameter, a number that illuminates a characteristic from a sample. So for example, what if we took a look at this? When 100 San Diego college students were surveyed, 35 said they get less than 7 hours of sleep each night on average. Now, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but 100 San Diego college students, and there's a lot of colleges in San Diego, so we're not exactly sure how this sample was conducted, but 35 out of that 100 said that they get less than 7 hours of sleep each night on average. So obviously some nights they will, but most of the time they don't. So what are we looking at, and what is the statistic that is in that example? You think, well, there's a few different ways to represent it, and both the numbers 35 and 100 are important. So if it was 35 out of 100, then we can look, hey, we could just think of that as the fraction 35 out of 100. That's the statistic. That number illuminates something from this sample. And in this case, it's that many people get less than 7 hours of sleep each night on average, 35 out of 100. We could represent that same number in the decimal form, 0.35, or we could use a percentage. 0.35, of course, is 35%. Any one of those, they all represent the same thing. That's the statistic here. Okay. Now that we've defined the word statistic, you might think, all right, so what is the usefulness of statistics? And this is kind of the big picture idea. Why do we have statistics? Why are statistics such an important feature, even just in our day-to-day experience, let alone what's going to happen in this course? We have questions that simply require too much data to be gathered to be answered directly. Okay, if we wanted to answer this question definitively with no uncertainty, it would be impossible. It would just require way too much energy, time, resources, and in most cases, it's not even a question of it would be too much time or resources. It's simply not even physically going to be possible. But statistics is the way around that. Okay, so if we look at our example of the college students who get less than 7 hours of sleep each night on average, so kind of go back a step from what we saw earlier, and the root question is, what percentage of San Diego college students get less than 7 hours of sleep each night on average? Okay, so that's the question we would like an answer to. Well, there are two ways to try and gather information about that. So here's the two options. Option number one is the direct way. Well, go and ask every San Diego college student. Find every San Diego college student and ask them how many hours of sleep each they get on average. Do they get less than 7 hours on average, right? That's going to be a lot of people, in the tens of thousands, maybe even up to 100,000 college students. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, our campus alone has near 10,000 students just at Miramar College. And there are many community colleges in San Diego, and there are many universities in San Diego, and then there's schools, colleges that are completely online all the time, right? There's other types of schools and things. So is it even possible? I mean, let alone the amount of resources that would take. Is that even possible to ask? Because probably by the time you got done compiling the list of all the college students, the list has by that point changed because someone has who was taking courses decided not to, in the time it took you just to gather all the names. So good luck if we want to find all of the college students at any one moment and ask them this question. So that's just not realistic. Okay, but option number 2 gives us a really good alternative. Let's carefully survey only some San Diego college students and use the results to make a claim about all students. So we learned about the sampling methods. That's why the word carefully is there. We want to carefully, in one way or another, get a good representation of all of San Diego. And once we have that, now that will be, probably less than 1,000 college students, depending on how we go about it. That's very realistic. And we can use the data we get from just that sample to make a claim that, well, this is what we got from the sample, so we're estimating that this is going to be true for all of San Diego college students across the board. So let's say we use that example with the 35%. If we got 35% from our survey, then we would take an educated guess that it's 35% for all San Diego college students if we were to look at the entire population. So the point of a statistic is so you can make an educated guess about an entire population, when getting the data for that entire population is just not something that can be done. Okay, I just want to wrap up with this slide here. What are the goals of this course? Good way to wrap up. I thought of 2 things. Number 1, we're going to develop techniques. Develop techniques on how to best collect data, on how to present our data. That's actually chapter 2, is how to present data. How do we analyze data? Those are future chapters. And how do we interpret data? And there are lots of really fascinating techniques and just what we can analyze and what we can interpret. And those are 2 different things. We're probably most familiar with presenting data because we see data presented to us a lot. Okay, and then I came up with another goal besides that. Number 1 really gets at what the course is, but I hope a big takeaway for you is number 2. And we recognize a lot of you guys, depending on your majors, you might very well use statistics in your day-to-day experience in your career, let alone just in life. But some of you might very well not use statistics after this course, and you need the course, but what actually happens in your job, you may or may not need it. We recognize that, but that said, you can still get a lot out of this because a basic, number 2, right? A basic understanding of how statistics are presented to us in the news, in the media, and just in our day-to-day. We can get some insight into how they come up with those numbers and what they might be up to even in presenting them to us. So I hope everybody can take away number 2 and take that with them and just to enjoy a fuller experience of life and being a consumer, really. Lastly, I found this image and I thought it was fitting. So we've got a coffee mug and a pen and a napkin, and it says, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." So we have our goals here, and we have a plan. We've got, a plan for the course, what we will cover and when, and quizzes, and lots of labs and projects. So we've got a plan to execute that goal. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Go take a look at the Chapter 2 lecture.